when I say that they don't know what it's like to feel sober, what I mean is they don't know what it feels like to have a normal brain. They don't know what it feels like to have a fully healthy, normal, sober brain with normal brain chemistry. Because that's what I'm really getting at. The most dangerous thing about weed is the fact that you're able to smoke every single day without any serious negative repercussions. And obviously, there are negative repercussions, which is what this whole video is about. But when I say serious negative repercussions, I mean something like meth. If you were to smoke meth every single day, or if you were to smoke crack every single day, there are serious, visible, and crazy you know what I'm talking about. Like when you smoke crack or meth every single day, watch Breaking Bad. You know the bad things that happen to you. So you're able to smoke weed every single day without reaching rock bottom. But people can't smoke meth or smoke heroin every single day without reaching rock bottom. There's a huge visible, I guess you could say, change within themselves that they need to stop smoking. When you drink alcohol every single day, it's easy to hit rock bottom. But the thing is with weed, it's kind of hard to tell you're even at rock bottom because you just don't know. The effects are super, super subtle to the point where you have no clue. It's kind of the quote where they say, death by 1,000 cuts. What does that mean? When you smoke weed, every single day, you're slowly and slowly and slowly cutting yourself to the point where you just bleed out because you have so many cuts on your body. Something like heroin or meth, that's like a whole stab wound right there. Or bigger cuts than weed, I guess you could say. That's a whole stab wound right there. So if you just stab yourself every single day, then obviously you're going to bleed out quicker. But with weed, it takes a long time to actually realize the negative side effects. And some people, they go their whole life smoking weed every single day, and they don't even know what the other side is like. And I know I say this all the time, but it's exactly like that scientific experiment where they took a frog, they put it in a pot with normal water in it, and then they slowly turned up the heat until the water started boiling. The frog never jumped out. In this scenario, the water is the weed, and you are the frog. You have no clue what's on the other side when you stop smoking weed, and it is crazy. So I'm going to explain my whole story and what happened after I quit smoking weed. So I got to smoking weed back when I was in high school. I started smoking heavy when I was in grade 11, and from then I was smoking multiple times a day, every single day. I used to be one of the biggest stoners I know. I was the one who was rolling everyone's blunts, rolling everyone's spliffs, and I was known as like the weed man. I used to sell it here and there, you know. I don't know if I could say that online, but I used to sell it. It just used to be my whole identity. I used to be the weed man. If someone wanted to smoke weed, they would come to me. If someone wanted to smoke weed for the first time, then they would come to me. I've, bro, I've literally put so many people on smoking weed that I actually feel guilty for it till this day because I can see the effects that it's having on them. But I put so many new people on smoking weed, so I used to be the weed guy. Like that was my whole identity back in high school, and even after high school, I was also the weed guy as well. So I used to be one of the biggest stoners that I've ever known. After about a year and a half or 2 years after I started smoking heavy, it wasn't until I took mushrooms, and when I say mushrooms, I mean psilocybin mushrooms, magic mushrooms, where I had the realization that weed was just screwing me in every single aspect within my life. So when I took the mushrooms, I had a big realization that if I didn't start smoking weed in the first place, then I would have a better relationship with my family. I'd have a better relationship with my friends. I would be further in my career because back in high school, I was also a barber cutting hair. So I would be further in my career. I'd be working at a top barber shop. And it just made me realize that I just needed to quit. So after I took those mushrooms, I quit for about 3 months. And that was the first time I had a taste of what it felt like actually being sober. But obviously, I went back to it, and it took me another 4 or 5 years to actually fully quit smoking weed. And it doesn't need to take 4 years to quit. It just took me 4 or 5 years to quit because I had some things I needed to go through or things that I needed to realize before I was actually able to quit. So it really doesn't need to take 4 or 5 years to quit. You could quit a lot easier than that. But I just had to go through those experiences to make me be the type of person who is actually able to quit. Anyways, before I started smoking weed, I was a very like vibrant person. Like I would laugh a lot, I would talk a lot, I was very social. But when I started smoking weed, one big thing that I noticed is that I was just not able to talk to people anymore. It just completely screwed up my social skills. It made me like a very socially awkward person. It kind of like isolated me, if you know what I'm saying. So I didn't want my family knowing that I smoked weed, so I just wouldn't talk to my family at all because I didn't want them knowing that I was high. And a lot of you could probably relate to this too. Like you don't want your family knowing that you're high, obviously, especially if you're that young. So same thing with talking to my friends. Like I was very socially awkward. It made me feel like I just couldn't talk to people. I couldn't formulate the words in my head to say to people. Like, bro, I couldn't talk to the girl. I couldn't spit game at all, bro. I could not talk to females at all. Before that, I was fine. Before that, I was completely fine. But when I started smoking weed, it just completely screwed up all the game that I've had. Even meeting new people at parties, or even meeting new people when I was cutting hair, or being a barber, like it just screwed up my conversation skills. It kind of took the color out of life. It made me feel very dull. It made me feel very anxious around people. It made me feel socially anxious. It made me feel as if like things were boring. That regular life was a boring thing. I used to watch a lot of anime when I was a kid, and when I started smoking weed, watching anime just wouldn't stimulate me anymore unless I was high. So I needed weed for things to become stimulating. I needed weed to eat food. I needed weed to do anything. Before I went to the mall, I had to smoke weed. Before I went to the movies, I had to smoke weed. Before I went to a restaurant with my friends, I had to smoke weed. If I was at a party, I had to smoke weed. Before anything, I had to smoke weed. I had to have weed on me, or else I just would not enjoy that occasion. Even at family parties, like me and my cousin, we'd have to smoke weed before then to even enjoy ourselves. And we have to go and hide to make sure people knew that we weren't high. It was stupid. Anyway, smoking weed just took the color out of my life. Like, I noticed that I wasn't laughing as much. I wouldn't really find things funny like that anymore. I would just be bored all the time. I'd walk around school feeling like an emotionless zombie. Like, I'll just walk around school with my head down like this, kind of like socially awkward, wouldn't want to talk to anyone. But yes, there's a reason why this happens. There's a reason why weed does this to people, but people just don't realize it because they're high every single day, so they don't have anything to compare it to. They don't know what it's like to have a, or they don't know what it's like to be sober, so they have nothing to compare it to. And a lot of people like to deny these negative repercussions that weed has, but they are very, very real, and you won't lose them unless you actually quit smoking weed. But anyways, the reason why all these negative things happen to you is because when you smoke weed every single day, you are completely tarnishing and demolishing your brain chemistry. A lot of people don't like to admit this, but this is a very true thing. You become physically addicted to smoking weed because you are literally screwing up your brain chemistry, and you need the weed to kind of supplement for the lost brain chemistry inside of your brain. So the main thing that you're screwing up in your brain is your dopamine levels. If you don't know what dopamine is the neurotransmitter or chemical in your brain that's responsible for things like motivation. Whenever you do something that kind of gives you some sort of reward, release dopamine in your brain. That's why it's known as the feel-good chemical or the motivation chemical. If you have some sort of motivation to do something, like motivation to eat that hamburger or motivation to eat that cheesecake, it releases dopamine. When you eat that cheesecake, your brain releases dopamine. That's why it's known as the feel-good chemical. But the main thing that it's responsible for is motivation. So when you smoke weed, what happens? When you smoke weed, you're artificially inducing your dopamine, and you're skyrocketing your dopamine levels to a level that is super unnatural for your brain to handle. Your brain can't handle the amount of dopamine that your brain is producing when you smoke weed. It's not natural. So what you're doing when you smoke weed is you're artificially inducing dopamine within your brain. So you're skyrocketing your dopamine levels to a certain amount, and be honest, what you do after you smoke weed, you're doing more dopamine-inducing things. Like you're watching explicit videos, you're watching adult content, you're playing video games, eating junk food, watching movies, anime, whatever. You're doing more dopamine-inducing things. So if you are already skyrocketing your dopamine levels to a certain level when you already smoke, what you're doing after is you're doing more dopamine-inducing things. So you're skyrocketing your dopamine levels even more. So your dopamine levels are skyrocketing to a point where your brain can't handle. So what happens if your brain has that much dopamine in its system? It crashes down really quick. And when it crashes down, it goes below the natural baseline that it was at before. So let's say your dopamine levels were at a 0 before you started smoking. You'd smoke, your brain would go up to maybe like a 50, and then you do more dopamine-inducing things, like watching porn or something like that. Your brain will go up to like maybe an 80. And your brain's dopamine levels would crash down, go below that 0 baseline, and then go down to like negative 50. And it would take some time for your dopamine levels to go back to normal again, go back to 0. So that's why whenever you smoke weed, you feel that crazy come down. And you need to smoke again to kind of not feel that come down anymore. You need to smoke again to get your dopamine levels back to a level that would be sustainable at. You need to smoke again to get your dopamine levels back to a normal level where you don't feel like shit anymore. Same thing with your serotonin levels. When you smoke weed, you're screwing with your serotonin levels. Serotonin is this chemical in your brain that's responsible for feeling good, mood regulation. So if your serotonin levels are messed up, you're just naturally not going to feel good. You're going to feel like a bum. You're going to feel dull. You're going to feel like depressed kind of. This is why SSRIs or antidepressants, what they're doing is they're flooding your brain with serotonin basically, so you can kind of supplement the low levels of serotonin. So if you're screwing with your dopamine and serotonin levels whenever you smoke weed, what do you think is going to happen? This is why when you smoke, there's no color in your life anymore. There's no more vibrance. You need to smoke weed to feel good. So really think about this. What happens when you artificially induce something within your body? Your body stops producing it. Your body already has too much of that artificial thing, so your body stops producing it. It's the exact same thing with melatonin. Let's say you're to take melatonin every single night to fall asleep. Your brain stops producing melatonin because you're already getting enough melatonin externally, so your brain stops producing it because there's already too much. Your body adapts to certain things, so it's the same thing with dopamine. If you're smoking weed every single day, artificially inducing dopamine within your brain, what's going to happen? Your dopamine receptors in your brain become dull. So if you bring your brain out of its natural homeostasis, you have to rely on weed to get those chemicals so you're able to do things. This is why you feel as if you need weed for life to be more exhilarating. This is why you need weed to do something, because you're bored without it, because your brain's not producing the dopamine that it needs to actually enjoy that thing. And since dopamine is the motivation chemical, this is why you are so lazy whenever you smoke weed. This is why stoners have the stigma that they are lazy people, in which they are. Because your brain doesn't have the motivation chemical in itself to even do things that you need to do or want to do. You literally can't produce a chemical in your brain that's responsible for motivation. Think about it. And this is why weed is so dangerous, because it makes you a shell of yourself, especially if you are at a young age and you have a life to build for yourself. Smoking weed is one of the worst things that you can do, because it completely wrecks your brain chemistry and it completely wrecks your motivation levels. Now, what happens when you stop smoking weed? After the 4 years it took me to quit smoking weed, my life changed. Everything in my life just kind of went upwards when I stopped smoking weed for an extended period of time. The number one thing that I could think of is the changes in my mood. I just felt like I was in a good mood all the time because the dopamine levels in my brain were back to normal. So normal things actually felt stimulating to me. I could go to the mall and just walk around and feel completely happy and just look at the leaves and watch the sunset or something like that and feel completely happy and at ease. I didn't need weed to enjoy those things because the dopamine levels in my brain were completely normal, so those natural things would satisfy. Me. Like normal things, let's say we didn't smoke weed at all. Normal things like watching the sunset or getting sun or going to the beach, that's just enough to actually make you feel good. Think about it. When you were a kid, going outside and playing in the park, that was the best thing in the world. Eating new food, that was the best thing in the world. Going to the movies, that was the best thing ever. But when you smoke weed, it takes that away from you. So when I stopped smoking weed, normal things just became fun again. Like I could just walk around the park, not listen to any music or anything like that, and find enjoyment in the smallest things in life. The next thing that I have to mention is the relationships in my life. After I stopped smoking weed, my relationships just kind of skyrocketed and went up. My social skills skyrocketed and went up because I actually had the motivation to go ahead and talk to people.
Appreciate y'all. Y'all stay tuned. This means